I saw an early screening at Comic-Con of the Atari Game Over documentary, which was going to be the first of several documentaries that were planned to be released. Now it's going to be the only one because they shut down the studios before it can get started, really. But they're going to allow this one to come out because it's basically finished. So the weird thing about this was that on Thursday night at Comic-Con at the Red and Gas Lamp, we screened the AVGN movie, which, it's not spoilers, a large part of the movie is about E.T. and the Atari landfill. The very next day, we're back at the same theater watching the documentary, and me and James were like, wow, this is kind of weird. We had no idea they're going to be screening it. At the panel, they revealed, yay, in 4 hours, we're going to be screening this. So we go there. The cool thing is that Chris Parnell from Saturday Night Live, who does the voice of one of the voices on Archer, he was there, and it's the first time I ever randomly met a celebrity. Frank has met Kevin Bacon, Quentin Tarantino randomly. He basically knocked over Seth Green almost on Comic-Con floor one year. He had a full conversation with the very hot Rosario Dawson. I've never met any celebrities. Which, and probably, by the way, I've never even seen Frank talk to a celebrity. It's probably the funniest thing on earth, especially Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, I would imagine that's humorous.
But Chris Parnell was there, and I'm like, Chris Parnell. She goes, yeah, how you doing? You know, with his voice. And I'm like, you're a fan of video games? He's like, oh, no, I'm just friends with the director. I just thought that was funny. He was totally honest about it.
Hey, at least he was honest about it and tried to play it off like he was.
But the documentary itself, if I maybe there'll be something with me and James talking about it, if you can click there. I thought it was pretty well done. As I said in the review, not to rehash, the problem with this documentary is that, of course, everyone knows the landfill exists. It's been documented. So it's not that they try to skirt around that, but they just sort of ignored it and try to play up the myth part of it more. But even within the first 15 minutes of the film, they're talking to the guy who physically witnessed it there in '83, who's now he's basically still in charge of basically he even says I'm like a garbage expert. I like to track where everything's in the landfills.
How long was the documentary?
It was probably 98% done. All the effects were done. They had a lot of cool animations.
No, but how long was it?
Yeah, I know. I'm getting there. I'm just trying to, in my head, work it out. It was probably between, I'd say, 90 and 100 minutes.
Okay,
probably
so if you're acknowledging that within the first 15 minutes, I don't mind. I really dislike it even now when it's played up as being a myth. So if you've got the guy acknowledging it within the first 15 minutes, the guy who saw it there and they're bringing him in, that's fine.
The problem is there wasn't a lot of answers to what actually occurred about the actual landfill, because there was no solid number given for how many games they found. Mm-hmm. They didn't say anything about the cement. Supposedly there was a cement cap on this, at least part of it, and maybe where they dug there wasn't a cement cap. They did allude to the fact that Alamogordo was afraid that they would unleash something. They had mercury-laced pigs at this dump, supposedly, and they didn't say it, but from talking to other people like Mike Batey, that they're afraid of getting at that and there was cement poured over it, and that's where the games could have been. Either way, they got to some of the games, but they didn't say the exact amount. They did say less than 10% were actually ET. Which that sounds about right. Yeah. Because I said this in the review with James. People don't understand that was just one plant that closed down. That was the games just from one plant. That wasn't all the games from the U.S. Supposedly, according to Mike, Sunnyvale, there's a shit ton of more stuff buried in Sunnyvale, where Atari's headquarters is.
That makes far more sense.
But you can't get at it because they rebuilt over it, like either a recycling plant or something else. You just can't get at it, like parks and stuff that they wouldn't probably ever allow it. That to me is the real story. What millions? If there's millions of games, they're in Sunnyvale. They're not in Alamogordo, New Mexico. So it was entertaining because the centerpiece was Howard Scott Warshaw, who is infinitely a nice guy. Like, he's the nicest guy you can possibly meet.
He seems super likable.
Very likable. I met him at the AVGN video shoot out in the desert. It was in California 2 years ago. Talked to him for maybe 15, 20 minutes. Very, very nice guy. Very affable. And he was nice enough to be interviewed by Destin for the video game.
I was going to say, where did we get him for the video game years? Was it there?
Yeah, Destin, who they're both out in the San Francisco area, he interviewed him.
Nice.
Very nice guy, which is funny because in that interview, and we actually had this in video game years talking about it, he didn't believe they were buried. He didn't believe that it would be cost effective, a company that was dying in bankruptcy, to bury them. But as I said with James, that was really the only option. What do you do with hundreds, either tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of games that are literally worthless stock? Retailers don't want them. They can't give away what they have. They already sent it back. You can't sell them directly to consumers. They don't want them. And what are you going to sell them for anyway? How are you going to set up that distribution anyway? You probably don't want to keep them in. You don't want to pay the tons of money for warehouses to rent them to keep them anyway to store them. What else do you do with them?
Well, that was always the biggest argument I had. The housing fees for what is garbage, and what they always said was, and what I always believe because it's just a more sensible story. It wasn't all ET, and a lot of it was returns and defects and things that got sent back that they never disposed of appropriately. Sure. So yeah, it makes sense that they would bury it or dispose of it.
It's
in a
literally
way,
back
because
then.
it's just costing them money to keep it around.
It's literally garbage. That's not like any hyperbole. It's garbage. No one wanted it.
Yeah.
So that was their alternative. Just get rid of it. You're already bleeding money. You don't want to bleed more by storing it. That was probably. I hate to say burying it was the cheapest, smartest thing to do at the time.
Sure.
So there you have it. That's going to come out in the fall. That documentary. Like I said, it was like 95% finished. Howard Scott Warshaw. Probably if it wasn't for him, they would have had a documentary, because the actual process of going through, getting permission from the city to dig, the pre-dig excavation, that is so not interesting at all. The actual dig's not interesting because they actually didn't show that much of it. Like they basically showed all the spectators in the sideline like looking, oh, did they find something? And then they dump it on the table or the game. Like, that's not interesting at all. That's really isn't.
That's kind of a letdown.
Yeah. The actual dig is the least interesting part. The interesting part is the story of the fastest growing company in American history falling off a cliff. Now, what I would have liked them to go into more was talking about Howard Scott Warshaw's, what did he actually do in those 5 weeks?
Yes.
It was him, it was a guy who did some of the art, and a guy who did the sound. That was it. 3-man team working on a game in 5 weeks that he said probably should have taken 6 to 8 months to complete. Usually the games took between 6 months and a year, he said, or 8 months to a year. So I want to know the stress level that he had in those time, and his thought about, was he going to be able to complete it? What did he sacrifice? Blah, blah, blah. So I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but it was emotional for him coming back to even Sunnyvale and seeing the original headquarters where he worked at. Basically, I think it's abandoned now, or I don't know, something else is there. But anyway, that's the documentary. I think it's worth it. But Xbox Studios, that's their first and final documentaries. They're closed down.